these guys that are following us around are from the BBC, and they're here doing a documentary about a case that just recently concluded. That was an aggravated murder case, and it was aggravated murder means if there's an aggravating circumstance that accompanies a murder, and as a result, the higher penalties are available: the death sentence, life without parole, all of those. And the thing that I wanted this group to understand is that there's a process. If there's a murder that's accompanied by an aggravating circumstance, then that makes it eligible for higher penalties. And once those charges are brought, then we prosecute it. Now, the jury decides what a defendant is guilty of, and that's the process. And in this case, it involved carjacking, and an 82-year-old man was carjacked and pushed out of the car and subsequently died. And the jury was instructed on wanton murder, manslaughter second degree, and reckless homicide, as well as the robbery. And they found the defendant guilty of manslaughter in the second degree and robbery in the first degree. And I was asked by these folks from BBC, what did I have a reaction to that? And I said, my reaction is that's the process. And juries make that decision. And they did, and I don't ever quarrel with juries. Sometimes I don't agree with them, but I don't criticize them. And so away we go.
So this case would have been eligible for the
Yeah,
death
yeah.
penalty
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that you had the murder and we had the robbery too, which is the aggravating circumstance.
Right.
But why do you think the jury chose the manslaughter?
Well, of course, I don't know why, but they probably think in terms of intentional. Mm-hmm. You know, that most people, when you think about murders, most of the public doesn't have they think premeditated is part of the lexicon that we use, and it's just not. Mm-hmm. This was, they think intentional murder maybe, and this, I don't think the guy.
The robbery was, perhaps the jury thought the robbery was intentional, but,
mm-hmm.
but maybe the death wasn't.
Right.
Seems to be the line of thinking there.
So the guy got 25 years, and he'll be sentenced sometime not probably in a month, and we go on to the next case. We want their opinion.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I don't want them standing up shrieking in the middle of the courtroom that they don't like this and they haven't talked to us and that sort of thing, because we do talk to victims all the time.
And occasionally, I guess you reach a point where you're not able to give the victim what they think is fair. I mean, does that happen? You talked about sometimes
constantly
from a position of weakness. Explain that.
Well, in every homicide, even the one where I walk in here and kill you, your family
or less,
yeah.
Then you have to make a decision on that. And I guess that's where sometimes it takes some explaining to the family and making sure that they understand.
No, life without parole eliminates the appeal process. If they plead guilty to life without parole, they're going to die in prison, and there's no appeal.
Have you ever pursued a death penalty case where the family has told you, we don't want the death penalty for this?
Yes.
And you go ahead and pursue that case?
Sure.
Why?
Because it's the law, and we let juries make the decision. Now, we know full well that if they stand up there and say to the jury that they don't agree with the death penalty and they don't want it on the table, that the jury would take that into consideration during the penalty phase.
Sure. So you don't try to block that. It's
Nope.
just you do your job.
Right.
Which and as you said before, it's your policy in your office. Because every prosecutor, I would assume, has that discretion. Is that correct?
To a certain degree. It's the discretion that leads to arbitrary decisions about who's going to get the death penalty option and who isn't. And I don't do that. I want to be consistent. I want to apply the law consistently, and we do.
There are some prosecutors in this country that refuse to pursue the death penalty.
That's correct.
Just like you say, I'm always going to pursue the death penalty.
No, I'm going to pursue aggravated murders and let the jury make the decision about the appropriate punishment for the crime that's been committed.
But some, as a policy, say, you know what, I'm not going to. They're not effective anyway. The appeal process is
They're
horrendous.
effective for that defendant. Yeah. That deters that defendant from committing another crime like that.
So do you feel that capital punishment is a deterrent? Do you think it's actually, do you think people think about that?
It's a case, you know, Don, it's a case-by-case thing. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying, but there's studies that say that it's a deterrent. There's studies that say it's not a deterrent. I don't get hung up in all that sort of thing. The death penalty option is a case-by-case issue. And the question is what's the appropriate penalty for the crime? And if you give juries the options, they make the decision, and I live with whatever decision they make.
You know, it's funny, as a homicide detective, I actually had someone ask me one time, they said, listen, if I tell you what I did, can you promise me I won't get the death penalty? In so many words. Well, he wasn't even eligible for the death penalty in this case. So I said, sure. So I know there are cases, at least at the level that I was involved, where, you know, the suspects, they know the law, they think they do at least, and it is a deterrent for them. You know, they don't want any part of that. But as you said, the deterrent.
I got one for you. These guys that are on death row, if it wasn't such a big deal, why in the hell do they spend all of their energy appealing to try to avoid a death sentence? If it wasn't something they were afraid of.
Some people say they have nothing better to do, and it's on someone else's dime anyway,
That's
right?
true.
Because that is the other issue with capital cases, is a lot of resources go in from the state to defend these people. They're automatically, it's basically a blank check, is that correct? If you receive a death penalty.
Seems like it.
It seems like you have a defense team that is going to do everything they can and use every single appeal that they could possibly come up with. They just, what do you say? They just, the shotgun effect, just throw something out there until it sticks. They're more likely to do that in death penalty cases.
That's right.
Do you think that, is it worth it? Is it worth the cost?
Well, you see, I refuse to put a price tag on the life of a victim. Now, those people are willing to put a price tag on that life. Not me. I think the criminal justice system is set up to deal with these issues, and the price doesn't bother me. I mean, hell, think about it. What does it cost? $17,000 a year to keep people in prison? You multiply that times their life expectancy, and I'm telling you, it's going to cost more to keep them in prison than to execute them. But hell, the concern we have now is that the greatest cause of death on people on death row is old age. You know, they're just there until they die.
Well, we recently had a case that you and I worked, and this person was on death row for years, since I guess the early 1990, and he ultimately died of cancer. What's ironic about that is, even though he was waiting to be executed, he spent a lot of money fighting his cancer in the meantime. So I guess that's your point about the fact that it costs a lot of money to keep people in prison too, just like it costs a lot to go through these appeal processes. And there's the cost of crime that you talked about overall too. The cost of crime that is passed on to the victims. What's your feeling on that? You know, we've got a budget that says we spend this much, but when they release people from prison, what have you found? How does that tally up?
Well, first of all, I'm going to. Our criminal justice system treats victims like crap. There was this judge in Louisville, just within the last month, that read a victim impact statement, which is a written statement written by the victims of a crime to tell how this crime has affected them. And this couple had a 3-year-old child, and these two yard birds home invaded their house and put a gun in the father's face and screaming and hollering, "Give me your money, give me your money." And then when the mother wrote the victim impact statement about the impact this crime had had on their 3-year-old, she said she was afraid of black men because the home invaders were black. Well, excuse me, the judge promptly vilified these people in court. I mean, just punked them for that, and then probated the home invader, the armed robber. Now, he has caught all kinds of hell about that, and should. I mean, that's, you know, internationally, even as far as London, England. You know what I mean, Tom?
I do.
Yeah. So, at any rate, it's that's that.
Well, a lot of people feel the judges represent the defendants, and they have no voice. The victims have no voice for the judges. I mean, that's the perception that people have now with the way things are going. More criminal justice news and views at LexingtonProsecutor.com, and we'll see you next week on In Touch.